Welcome to Milton's Literary Musings. My name is Pratim Datta. I'm a professor in technology, but I enjoy literature, so this is my first take on a quick discussion of famous novels and works and poetry, and we'll start off with George Orwell's 1984. Now, mind you, George Orwell's 1984, this famous book, is published in 1949. This is following Churchill's 1946 speech. World War II's over in 1945. Soviet Union's riotous mood with Zhukov taking over Berlin. It is a strange time, as Churchill says that in Stettin in the Baltic, to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended upon the continent. So 1949, George Orwell's this famous book 1984 is released, and it's a dystopian novel that talks about the dangers of totalitarianism, mass surveillance, and the manipulation of truth, right? This sets in a lot of terms we use today and we'll see as we progress. So it's a very bleak future, and it's one man's futile attempt to maintain his individuality and insanity in a world where the state controls everything, where collectivist ideas rule, individualism is shunned, right? Now this is the story of 1984 broken down. I've created a more of a narrative element to it. So let's look at the world of 1984. So the novel is set in something called Airstrip 1, formerly GB, right, Great Britain, in a super state. So there are three super states: Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia, right? So these three super states, the story here of 1984 is in the superstate Oceania, and Oceania is sort of encompasses England and everything. Society here is ruled by something called the Party, under the ideology of something called INGSOC, which is English Socialism, and there's a surveillance of Big Brother, a figurehead leader who may or may not actually exist, right? Think of it, it's taking back this whole idea of sort of deifying the whole idea of the state, right? We don't know who it is. It's us. It's a power beyond us. It's a bit like gods. And it is a little bit, to an extent, very much like what Japan used to have with its emperors like Hirohito and so forth, where some people may not have ever seen the emperor. They know that one exists. That's all they need to know. So, in this world, the interesting pieces of puzzle are as follows. There are telescreens. These are televisions that can't be turned off. They're used for propaganda and monitoring, two-way monitoring. You can't turn it off. It reminds you of Jeremy Bentham, the philosopher's very famous notion of something called the panopticon, right? An eye that's ever watching you. It's like the eyes of Sauron. There's the thought police, which are the secret police that hunt down thought crime. If you are independently thinking, if you are a bit of a Socratian disciple where you believe in skepticism, you'll be hunted down by the thought police. And you've got Newspeak, it's a very reduced language. The whole idea is don't complicate language, then people will think more. Reduce it, right? Reductio ad absurdum, designed to make rebellious thoughts quite impossible. Tamp it down in this case, right? And then of course something called doublethink. This is the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs simultaneously. For example, war is peace, right? A public place should never be open to the public. So, part one begins with something called the rebellion. So it starts off with a protagonist whose name is Winston Smith, who's a 39-year-old, a very frail and cynical outer party member who works at the Ministry of Truth. Right? His job is to rewrite historical records to match the party's current ever-changing narrative. And of course, anytime you think of truth, you think of the terms like the Russian Soviet newspapers like Pravda, which meant truth, right? The whole idea is our job is to only tell the truth. But truth oftentimes is creating fictions out of historical pieces. Secretly, Winston despises the party. He starts a forbidden diary, a major act of thought crime, where he writes down with Big Brother, over and over. He is terrified of being caught, especially by a dark-haired girl at his work, who he suspects might be a spy. There are some very famous lines and some incredibly clever ones too. This is, of course, George Orwell minds here. One is, it says, if you want to keep a secret, you must also hide it from yourself. And then there's another one among the many, many ones that are there. Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 make 4. If that is granted, all else follows. So, freedom basically is the ability to actually say what is there, not what is fed to you. Then comes the forbidden affair, which is part 2. So the dark-haired girl, Julia, passes Winston a note that says, I love you, beginning a secret, passionate love affair. For them, sex becomes a political act of rebellion against the party's restriction of sexual pleasure. Right? So the whole idea is work, 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 follow, follow, follow. Have pleasure. Pleasure is forbidden, but only for reproduction purposes. They begin by meeting in a hidden room above an antique shop owned by Mr. Charrington, believing that they are safe from the telescreens. Now Winston and Julia feel they have found an ally in somebody called O'Brien. He's a high-ranking inner party member who Winston believes belongs to something called the Brotherhood, an underground resistance led by Emmanuel Goldstein. Winston and Julia meet O'Brien, profess their hatred for the party, and are given a forbidden book that explains how the party maintains power. So they've been let into what otherwise would be something totally clandestine. There, some of the famous lines there are, or phrases and codes there are as follows. The party was trying to kill the sex instinct, or if it could not be killed, then to distort it and dirty it. And then the other one is, we are the dead. This is when Winston says that when he realizes that they might actually be doomed. Next comes the trap and the torture. So the room above the shop where they're meeting, where everybody's this underground, is going overground. Miss Charrington is a member of the Thought Police, and O'Brien is a loyal, high-ranking agent who's been watching Winston for 7 years. Winston is then taken to the Ministry of Love, where O'Brien tortures him for months. O'Brien explains that the party does not seek power for any noble reason, it seeks power for its own sake. Where there's a famous line which says, if you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. That's just spooky, sends a shiver down your spine. So Winston struggles to keep his love for Julia, but he's eventually broken in room 101, a place where everyone faces their worst fear. For Winston, this is rats. When a cage of rats is placed on his face, he screams, "Do it to Julia, not me!" Then comes the end. Total submission. After his release, a broken Winston meets Julia. They both admit they betrayed each other. This is like game theory, right? To protect oneself, you're willing to give up the other. It's just a matter of time. And no longer feel love. Winston now spends his days in the Chestnut Tree Cafe, drinking gin and submitting completely to the party's logic. The novel ends with Winston looking at a picture of Big Brother. He has been successfully re educated. He no longer hates him. And he ends with, he loved Big Brother. And of course, some of the other very not nice lines are the very famous phrase which has been used oftentimes ad infinitum and oftentimes ad nauseum, which is Big Brother is watching you, which is the opening slogan. The other one is, who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. And that's what Winston used to do, rewriting historical narratives to match it to the party line. Another one is, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. And that's the paradoxical slogan by the party. Another one is, doublethink means the power of holding two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously and accepting both of them. It's sometimes a bit of an oxymoron, but yeah, it's very interesting. And the last one to finish off is, the party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. Don't believe what you see or what you hear. Believe what you are given to learn. Learn it well and never forget. That's what Big Brother expects of you, wants of you, and demands of you. Oh, the last part's mine. But thank you very much, and I shall look forward to the next one. If you like it, of course, please sort of subscribe, and I'll try to get one in every week.